Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, How to Maximize Value when Selling Collections. My name is Colleen Boyle, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. I'm the Managing Director for the Fine Art Group, and I'm responsible for our national sales platform as well as our philanthropic strategy division. And I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves today, starting with Kate Waterhouse. Kate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Colleen. My name is Kate Waterhouse. I am a senior specialist in jewelry and watches, and I am happy to be with the Fine Art Group.
Carrie?
Sure, and I know there's still people joining this webinar, and just a quick reminder that the recording will also be available after the webinar for those who join late, who can't make it. My name's Carrie Lee Jeffrey. I'm a Senior Director of Agency and Advisory Services here at the Fine Art Group.
And Anita?
Hi, I'm Anita Harriet. I'm president of the Fine Art Group. I manage the United States for the firm. And we're so happy you could join us today. And we hope we can provide you some really helpful tools for selling your collections well.
Okay, let's advance to the first slide. When you're selling a collection, it can be really emotional, but it's also a business decision. And it's important to have a sales strategy in order to maximize value when selling an object or a collection. There's many ways an individual can consider selling a collection, and an auction strategy is one option. Carrie, why are auctions a good opportunity for sellers to consider?
Auction is always a very good opportunity for many different categories. First, it's a very transparent, open market. There are certain works or assets that really need the benefit of a competitive bidding strategy, very sort of significant rare objects that you really want the market to set the value. In other cases, if you're a fiduciary for an estate, or you're a foundation or corporation that really needs to have accurate reporting for financials, an auction strategy really ensures that you are sort of maximizing value. It's an open market and it's a very transparent market. That being said, there are many different categories that the Fine Art Group assists with, and each of those categories is going to have a very different route to sale. An auction is just one of those avenues, and each of those categories has different complexities around the sales strategy.
Thanks, Carrie. Can we go to the next slide, please? So besides auction, a client can also consider a private sales option. Anita, when should a client consider a private sale versus an auction sale?
Process of determining the best venue for sale and the best methodology really starts with understanding the object. Once we understand the object, understand the cost basis related to the object, and understand the market, then the most important thing to do is come up with a bespoke approach to sale. And sometimes what makes a lot of sense for an object that either would really benefit from, due to its rarity and its importance, to being offered to a few key collectors first, that sometimes is the best strategy and approach, because great collectors appreciate privacy. They actually sometimes don't even want to participate in public auctions. So a lot of times with our clients, after we've done our due diligence, we've done our auditing process, we've examined the different approaches to sale, we recommend a period of time for very bespoke, select private sale option, meaning only showing it to a few key collectors in the market. And that gives us a good pulse on the market, gives us a good pulse on our price, and potentially we sell it very effectively in private sales. And what that allows after a few months, if we're not able to sell it correctly and appropriately in private sale, then we would consider an auction process. So private is sometimes a great way to start for certain objects before we determine whether or not it makes sense to go to auction.
Anita, you bring up a really good point about discretion and anonymity. Can you maybe just expand a little bit on how can that occur via an auction process? How can a client remain discreet through the sales process?
So when you do go to sale at an auction, you do have the option sometimes, not all the time, but for a good select group of our clients, we provide the option of them remaining really fine art group clients. And then what that allows is a lot of, privacy and protection of their identity and their data. That's a bespoke conversation we have with our clients to make a determination as to whether or not that makes sense. So it is a potential option.
Okay, great. Thank you. And next slide, please. Carrie, the fine art groups are very involved with working with clients to sell their collections with the goal of achieving the highest possible return. Can you just walk us through what that process looks like?
Definitely. And, I should say that we work with, private individuals who are downsizing, executives for an estate who have a fiduciary responsibility to sell the contents of the estate, foundations, corporations, other not-profits. And each of those is going to have a very, very different process. Using the word bespoke again, I think it's not a one shoe fits all. What we initially do, it may be one asset or it may be a collection of 3,000 assets, and covering all different categories from modern and impressionist art, post-war and contemporary, antiquities, rugs, silver, collector cars, wine, whiskey. So sometimes it's a consignment where mixture of categories. Other times we're focusing on just a handful of work. Sometimes it's one work. And our initial step really is going to be reviewing the object, the work, and determining the best method for sale. As Anita mentioned, is this something that should be positioned for private sale to a select group of people? Is this something that should be offered to through an auction, through a particular strategy? Is this something that should be on consignment with a dealer? Is this something where we should pivot to a philanthropic strategy for the client, if that is what would make sense for their particular situation? Once we have our strategy for the assets, and we've sort of identified the method for sale, we have a full in-house marketing team, and with our consultants, we work with whatever the venue is, if it's a sale at auction, to come up with some really sort of curated marketing ideas, positioning in the market, is it when it should sell, how it should sell. Throughout the entire process, we have a collections management person and a registrar who do full financial tracking, like ahead of sale, during sale, post sale, reserve discussions, everything, so that there's accurate reporting, especially for large estates. This is very, very important. And post-sale management, discussing if there are any unsolds, or occasionally buyers default at auction or late payment. The fine art group is with you from initial strategy all the way through until like the final wire is sent for payment, as your independent advisor.
And Carrie, just to expand on that process, I know oftentimes we just see poor decisions being made when the clients try to go about it on their own, particularly if somebody's an executor. It's difficult because this is not a process that individuals go through on a daily basis. But yet the fine art group has a lot of experience, and not just with the US market, but with the global market. But along with the process, there are actually fees affiliated with, particularly with the auction process. And if you could move to the next slide, please. Anita, can you just explain, if a collection is taken to auction, just explain the fee structure and the difference between a buyer's commission and a seller's commission, and how the fine art group can assist with negotiating these types of fees?
Absolutely. It's it's kind of step one is negotiating fees, and then everything else that we do is actually what makes it sell well. So the fee structure is really just the math, right? So starting with the math of the sale. And a lot of people actually don't understand how auction houses actually make their money. And it's important to understand that. So the first thing you need to know is that anyone who buys at auction, and if we look at the big houses or the smaller houses, when you buy, hammer comes down, so $100,000, let's say it comes down, and then a buyer pays a buyer's premium. And that can range depending on the value of the piece. If it's a very, very expensive piece at the $20 million range, that's a smaller percentage than 25%. If it is a lower value piece, let's say $100,000 or so, you're going to pay upwards of 27%. So a buyer pays a buyer's premium, hammer plus premium. And that's very important for the auction houses because that's really predictable income for them. Then there's the seller's commission. So today we're talking about sale. So if you are selling an object and you receive a contract from the auction houses, they will charge you potentially a seller's commission. And that's really a negotiable number, a number very much based on the following scenario. One, the value of the object will very much determine the negotiation around seller's commission. Two, the complexity of the object or objects. So it's a very large estate with a lot of furniture and decorative art. That's a very different kind of quote unquote heavy lift from the auction houses than one painting or a diamond, right? They'll also look at additional fees that they have to pay, GIA certs, shipping, etc. All of that will come into their thoughts around what the seller's commission should be. The seller's commission is negotiable. So our job is to, again, once we understand a client's collection, understand the sales strategy, then to negotiate the math, right? What is the math around this sale? And the goal is for the clients, obviously, to pay the lower seller's commission and achieve the highest revenue with all the other things we do to sell things correctly and well in the auction marketplace. We have a preferred terms with auction houses, and that's something we can obviously discuss with a client if they'd like to discuss it at another time.
Okay, thank you, Anita.
Colleen, if I could just add one thing
Yes.
too that I always think is one of the most important parts here. You know, having the best terms is obviously the most ideal situation, but having the most amazing terms at the wrong sale venue or at the wrong estimate doesn't help you. So, you know, you can have 0% and be at an auction house that has no expertise, not the right collectors. It's not going to help you out in any way. So I think it is a very important component, but there's so much more to it than just the math and the percentages. It really is positioning it correctly.
And Carrie, that's a great segue into our next slide. What is the impact of an unsold lot at auction, Carrie?
So there's a very big impact for works that are trackable. So fine art, any category of fine art. There are databases that record results for these works, for these that are coming up for sale at auction. It's one of the biggest reasons why we have such a strong division working in the private sale arena. We are really looking through the works that we're going to be monetizing for clients to potentially offer works privately to avoid the possibility of going to auction where there may be an unsold. That being said, our goal as an advisor is we track the market. We're looking at results for the artists for that particular category. You know, how is the market performing? How are the sales performing? Do estimates need to be adjusted? We always want to make sure that we're meeting clients' expectations. And we work in alignment with the client in this way. You know, we don't want to have works go unsold. It's not in the client's best interest. It's not in our best interest. And our goal really is to work right up to the point of sale where we can pivot, adjust if there needs to be a reserve adjustment. If a contract or consignment has agreed upon and the sale is, 12 months from that date, really revisiting the market. Should we relook at these estimates, these artists? Is there something else we can add now to respond to the market? Our goal is always to minimize unsolds, especially for clients that that have a fiduciary responsibility. That being said, certain other pieces, sort of furniture, decorative arts, that's more minor. Unsold results aren't going to matter as much. Addition works, for instance, if you're one of 250, again, an unsold result is not going to hurt its future prospects. Typically, if the work goes unsold at auction, and the client wants to offer it again, an estimate is always adjusted. So that's always important to know. You always make money selling it well and appropriately positioned correctly the first time than you would if it's reoffered at a lower estimate. Couple caveats to that, which we'll reference in a future slide, but you ultimately don't want a work to go unsold. Our goal is to prevent that. And if a work does go unsold, we then can re-advise on how best to handle it.
And part of the process to prevent items from going unsold is to initially set those realistic expectations. And Kate, I know being the director of fine jewelry for the Fine Art Group, oftentimes clients will buy jewelry at retail, and then when they go to resell the item, the estimates may be maybe not quite what the client was anticipating. Can you just expand upon the strategy around auction, just the fact that estimates tend to be more conservative for a reason? Just explain a little bit about that thought process around creating estimates, particularly as it relates to jewelry.
Of course. When we talk about the disparity between retail values and auction estimates or fair market values, I refer to it as reverse sticker shock. Clients are paying retail premiums, and then when we're looking at the auction market, it comes back to something that's a little closer to wholesale. Some people describe it as wholesale, and I would say it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but we're looking at very simple mathematical equations to discuss break value. What are the diamonds worth? What are the gemstones worth? What is the metal worth? Is it signed by a major maker? Because that will add value. Is it a pair of earrings? Because those are commanding a premium in the marketplace right now. Or is it a brooch, where the values are very soft for brooches? So all of those components are considered when we're looking at putting value together and expectation in the kind of fair market end of the market rather than the primary market at retail.
Great. And just to continue along this conversation, if we can go to the next slide, please. You talked about some issues as far as positioning objects at auction versus private sale, which is the best option, looking at fee structures and understanding that everything's negotiable. But then there's other factors to consider when selling an object at auction. And Kate, you just want to expand a little bit on some of the other issues related to jewelry that clients should be aware of prior to sale?
Absolutely. So in today's marketplace, we come from a standpoint of more is more when it comes to independent outside research and understanding of a given object. And in many instances, that may mean that a diamond ring or a sapphire brooch may need to go to a gemological laboratory for further evaluation to confirm the origin of the stone, which can make a huge difference at sale, or just the color and clarity. Even the treatments that are done to a stone are all considered when we are looking at going to sale for any item. That can make a difference of a few $1,000s to, in some instances, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And from where we sit for gemological laboratory reports or extractions from one of the major watch firms such as Patek or Rolex, is that having that information takes any questions potential bidders may have about the object off the table. We now have the information and we know. It has become so important that we even see in some instances, you may have multiple reports on any given item. So you have an AGL report example up here. They're a wonderful, American Laboratory for Colored Gemstones. You may have an AGL report, and then we may back it up with a report from SSEF, or we may even report with Googlein, just to make sure that we're all under the agreement that it is a cashmere sapphire with no heat treatment. These are very important questions to answer ahead of sale. It makes the consignor more comfortable knowing what they put up, and it makes the bidders feel more comfortable to put the paddle up a few more times if they would like to.
So it can really make a difference in the final value of the object and the sales results. Yeah. And Carrie, Anita, do you want to add any additional thoughts? Any other considerations that sellers should be aware of when they're considering selling other types of objects?
Yeah, I'll just quickly touch on fine art, and then just referencing back to the GIA and to other documentation around the jewelry. In fact, I mean, not only is it important, it's required. And the market demands it, and it gives comfort, but it actually is a requirement now. And for paintings and fine art, there are requirements as well. So there's going to be the basic art loss registry, make sure there's no issues around title or ownership around the piece. That's one very important component. Two, if we receive paintings every day, because we have a lending practice and we have a very large agency practice, and if we receive something called a certificate of authenticity, we usually consider it inauthentic at that very moment in time. So for paintings, there are very bespoke approaches for each individual artist. And we will need to, under certain circumstances, make sure that that process has been conducted. And it may be done by the auction house or the dealer, or a client may ask us to take them through that process. So authentication is very, very important. And last but not least, we really do have to take specific focus on provenance. Paintings are not coins, they're not graded, right? So we actually need to look at other documentation to give the market comfort around purchase. So it's really about the market, making sure that buyers in the market are comfortable, putting their hand up and bidding, or tapping their computer, or however they're bidding on these objects. Carrie?
Oh, yes, definitely. And so, following what you just said, I mean, as I referenced in that earlier slide, there's so much complexity around each of these different categories, so much so that it's kind of hard to fit into a webinar like this. We could speak on each of these categories separately. So for instance, for antiquities, there's international and state restrictions and regulations, even to the point like every 6 months to a year, there's going to be different sort of regulations on what can and can't be sold. There's a lot more risk. Provenance is going to sort of be a very, very strong component in this area. That being said, we sort of hold someone's hand, walking them through this process. It can be daunting, and we want to make sure that there are no issues. We sort of can try to anticipate all the steps you'll need to take to get to sale and to have it be successful. Other categories for like numismatics, so coins, sports memorabilia, baseball cards, that sort of thing, they have specific grading requirements. And just like jewelry, there's a number of different firms out there that offer the service. That being said, there's only a number of firms that are sort of, the gold standard, that are their grading is going to be what buyers have confidence in. And that's what it's really about. These documents support the buyer's confidence in the object, and in doing so, elevate the eventual hammer price.
Mm-hmm. So Anita and Carrie and Kate brought up some really important factors to consider, the details around the sales strategy and what needs to really be uncovered even prior to going to sale. But there's even more decision making to be made. If auction is the best venue, which auction house, which geographic region, which sale. Carrie, can you just share some insight on how a sales advisor can help guide a client in making the best and right decision around the sale process? And what are some things to consider to make sure that that object is placed appropriately to maximize value?
I think this is one of the most important points. Sometimes there are going to be, estate attorneys or individuals who have sort of their backyard auction house, or they work with the top 2 auction houses, and it's a direct, they think it's an obvious direct route to sale. I don't think that that's the correct approach. I think every work needs to be considered individually, every piece, every type of object, because there are certain collectors markets that have very strong auctions within an auction house. There are certain regional markets that, again, have strength in a certain area. And the example you're seeing on the screen right now, and this is like a 6-month spread between 2 different auctions for the same work. And what is really interesting is that this is an artist that sells typically an Orientalist sale. It originally came up for sale in last year in the fall in a mixed category sale, and hammered for $56,505. That's with buyer's premium, I believe. It was then the buyer then sort of pivoted to the correct sale, which is the Orientalist sale in London, and it made almost double the original amount. And I like data like this. I mean, what's really, really important is that each artist, if we're speaking just about fine art, there are categories and sales that focus on that particular artist, that have a history of selling a particular type of work. For instance, there may be a sale that's just dedicated to California Impressionists or Pennsylvania Impressionists. There are certain examples where work should be, even though the consignor is in New York, it's a work that should sell in London. The buyers are going to be British. It's a British subject. It's a work that sells based in that market, or it needs to go to Paris. So even though we are in a world where it's all online bidding and there's a lot of momentum with people being able to bid internationally, there still are these pockets where buyers want to see something in person. They need that ease. They are also potentially looking only at one particular sale category. So the collectors for the Orientalist works, they may have confidence in this one particular single owner sale. They don't have the time to look at, the dozens of other sales throughout the year. They're focusing on this one. They trust the expertise of this specialist. And so I always think, as a fiduciary for these works, you always want to position the work in the sale that has a track record of selling that particular work well. And sometimes that means shipping it to a different country, or shipping it across the country, or any other different types of positioning.
And in addition to choosing the right venue, the right geographic location, the right sale, we're also finding a trend with more single owner sales being structured. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Carrie, can you just share your thoughts on the benefits of a single owner sale?
Definitely. And the single owner sale has existed at auction, I think, for a very long time, sort of going back to the last 100 years. But it was occasional. It wasn't. The last 3 or 4 years, we're seeing like a surge of these single owner sales coming to market. The biggest benefit is that collectors want to emulate these types of collections. There is an additional, we see sort of just in terms of like data, we see work selling for, on average, like 25% more in these types of sales where they're sort of packaged a certain way. This is especially true for mixed category single owner sales, where you have fine art, furniture, decorative arts, porcelain. You end up having a lot of cross marketing where collectors are introduced to a completely new category, which I think is wonderful. You end up elevating certain pieces. You end up creating new collectors. There's a lot of more marketing around these collections. They're much sexier in terms of how collectors view them. I'm also on the advisory side for the firm, and I know for clients that are voracious collectors, they love bidding in these types of sales. They want their collections to emulate these collections. It's usually, they're very curated collections. They're sophisticated in some ways. And so these single owner sales also, if acquiring certain pieces, that provenance, say from like the Paul Allen collection, for instance, that provenance stays with the work, and that value is added to the work as well as being part of an important curated collection by someone who was well known. What we're also seeing in the single owner sale space is that many of these collectors are positioning their collections with proceeds to benefit a particular charity or foundation or a cause that's important to them. And oftentimes the buyers, the collectors respond so well to this because they want to also support that particular cause. And so we're seeing an even greater percentage of, paying above market in some ways, just to support that cause.
And oftentimes with that single owner sale, there's usually a robust marketing strategy affiliated with it. So if the end result is proceeds being allocated to a charitable cause, that's part of the marketing strategy, as well as a reflection around the collector and why that person collected, and really setting up a legacy to honor and to appreciate that particular collector. That's another aspect that we're starting to see more and more frequently with the single owner sale, is the opportunity to use the single owner sale to create a legacy around the collector and the objects. The other thing we're seeing too is there are international houses, there are regional houses. If we can go to the next slide, please. Carrie, when would you recommend selling at a regional house versus an international house?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, in some cases, people feel like there's an obvious route to sale for certain pieces. I think there's nuance to every single piece. In some cases, there are such niche markets for a particular artist, for a particular type of object. Using the two examples you have on the screen are easy to show because they're the data behind them. For fine art, as I mentioned, there are certain databases, ArtNet, AskArt, that track results for these artists. And it's, in some cases, it's pretty heavy on which venues have the specialized, they have the collectors for this. So for instance, William Morris, glassmaker, and I think those dates are incorrect for there, so please don't look at that. This is an American glass artist that kind of recreates kind of antiquities, sort of like relics in glass, a very niche market. I believe he's still living, but is sort of reclusive, hard to get a hold of. He's much older now, but his market really went through galleries for a very long time. And then he sort of broke into auction. And one particular auction house championed his works, started getting sort of, figures over 100,000 for his pieces, and consistently did that. And their results brought in more consignments and collectors of his works, to the point that they have the market share. The significant collectors for this particular artist will go to that venue. There's a trust there that they have the database, they have the due diligence. If I was an advisor working with a client, I always want to go to, we don't want to take a chance somewhere. It's an established collector base within a particular department, is really for due diligence. It's your fiduciary responsibility to make sure that it's being positioned so that it's going to be seen appropriately. In other cases, like, the Hunt Slonim that you're seeing on the screen, it's very prolific. We constantly see them at appraisals in sort of like Florida and the South, and these birds are everywhere. That being said, the data is pretty obvious. This started out again as sort of a regional artist that was championed in New Orleans, built up his auction market, and then consistently sold these works for the highest price. So for instance, it's not to say that you're not going to get a good price if you sell it outside of New Orleans, but as a fiduciary, it's positioning it in the correct market to ensure it's being seen by the right people in the right venue. It's just one of the steps that I do for like due diligence, because then there is no question as to it being seen by the right buyers to maximize the eventual hammer price.
And then Kate, as the jewelry specialist and Anita as a fine arts specialist, do you have any other thoughts to add when you would recommend selling regionally versus internationally?
From where I sit selfishly, I like to use regional houses or work with regional houses specifically and boutique firms when it's going to make the client's objects look and feel special. I think that that's really important, where we're able to position it within a sale. If they're willing and able to do a rollout of a single owner sequence, which is like the miniature version of a single owner sale, they'll actually take a section of the catalog and add all of the pieces to one section of the catalog. And it reads as a single owner sale, but just kind of smaller. Those are moments when I think regional houses really do shine and are able to offer perhaps a different facet to the sale experience for a client and or their collection.
And, you know, we buy a lot for clients. We have a huge advisory division, and we buy across all categories, like everything from sports cards to fine art. So as a buyer, I always, besides the data, which I think is really, really important, as a buyer, I always like to think, which houses am I really excited when that catalog comes out? So for instance, if we are working very heavily in Western art, we get really excited when certain auction houses are releasing their annual sale, right? So the same is across all categories. So when I think to myself, oh, I'm so excited to see what are the Pennsylvania Impressionists going to be this year. Well, I know which catalog, I know which auction house to go to. I know who's going to have that sale. So a lot of it is we think as buyers, because that's really important. And then we think of also as sellers by looking at the data. Both of them are important components of determining a correct auction house.
A good point about the fact that there's annual sales, there are seasonal sales. So let's go to the next slide. Kate, why does the sales season make a difference? How can a sales season and selling at a specific time of the year impact the value of an object?
Of course. Well, every discipline and category has their own sale anchors annually. If we're looking at luxury goods, so jewelry and watches and handbags specifically are what we're looking at here, your anchors here in the US and the New York seasons are June and December. And the December is really considered the holiday season. It is amazing to see the price and the difference in pricing that we see for prices realized in the December sales. There is a certain fervor and energy, I would say, in the sales rooms and exhibition space because we are getting ready for the holidays and people are in the gift-giving mindset. We also see that the trade, so those who are working on the secondary market but might be antique dealers for handbags or they might be antique jewelry dealers, are also buying because they are also trying to make sure that they're prepared for the rest of the holiday season. And so we will see regularly prices are upticked dramatically. In some instances, and in others, it's just maybe an increment or two. There are certain makers that are going to fit that criteria. Obviously, Hermes, if it's signed by Van Cleef, Cartier watches typically do very well during this time of year. I would say, yes, we pay attention to sales season rather seriously. Conversely, in the June sales, we would want to see pieces that are obviously more season oriented, pink sapphires. Love to see a pink sapphire go to sale in the June sale season. Those are considerations that are made across a collection overall.
And then the last factor that we want to talk about today that can impact value, in addition to the sales season, in addition to the appropriate venue placement and geography and negotiating terms, has to do with guarantees. If we can go to the next slide, please. So Anita, back one slide, please. Anita, more clients are requesting guarantees for their sales items. Can you explain the importance of the guarantee and how this process works?
First of all, if you take a look at these examples, you're going to see some very high estimates and some very high prices. So understand that a guarantee structure and or irrevocable bid, that's the synonym, it's really only appropriate for objects over a certain value. Now, as everyone knows, if you have a collection going to sale or a couple unique works or one very important work going to sale, you're also very aware of the economic environment, right? We track trends in the auction marketplace very, very carefully. We track artists in the marketplace very, very carefully. And we know when there's some cracks in the market, where there's some instability in the market. Whether you are an individual or potentially an estate going to market, you want to potentially protect the sale. As Carrie mentioned, 0 of 0 is 0, right? So no matter how good your terms are, if it goes unsold, you're getting nothing, and potentially you've damaged the overall value of that work for a period of time. So one way to deal with either economic instability or potential worry around an unsold at a certain value threshold is to contemplate a guarantee. And a guarantee really means that either a third-party guarantor, and the Fine Art Group have been serious guarantors for a very long time. We've had 2 funds that are just guarantee funds. So you're either looking at a third-party guarantor or potentially the auction house serving as the guarantor for your object for sale. And what that means is essentially they are saying that no matter what, in negotiation with you, they will guarantee that you will receive a certain amount of money for that work when it goes to auction. It's typically around the low estimate, but not always. It can be higher than that. And that in order for them to provide that guarantee for you as the seller, you have to agree that should it go above that guarantee number, you're willing to give up a percentage of the upside. So you're willing to give up some revenue to protect the sale of that object. In certain circumstances where the economy is a little less stable, where we're not seeing people vigorously bid no matter what, it can be an excellent way to protect a collection, protect the value, and ensure revenue, either for an object or for potentially a collection. So if you're interested in a guarantee, you need to really have someone on your side helping you to think about what that negotiation looks like. And that's something we do very, very frequently with our significant clients.
Thank you, Anita. So we're going to wrap it up. We've talked about a lot of different aspects on how to maximize the value when selling a collection. I just want to reach out to the panelists. Does anybody have any final statements to make before we close out today's session?
I can just say that, there's a tradition for clients and collectors to work with advisors when you are looking to acquire art, potentially sell art. But I really think it's important to have an independent advisor for all those other categories as well. As Kate mentioned, just the differential between sort of the retail price if you're acquiring a piece of jewelry on the high street versus sale. Having an advisor even on the acquisition side for jewelry is so important, but equally as important on the sales side. And we have in-house expertise in all different categories. And can really sort of walk you through the process. So whether it's a whiskey collection, a entertainment memorabilia collection, coins, cars, Americana, all those different categories, we feel need a bespoke, independent advisor walking you through the process.
The only thing I would mention is that we feel very passionate about what we do. We think our job is very, very important. And I'd say it's more important now than ever. As I've mentioned, with all the economic instability we're seeing in the marketplace, with seeing some of the cracks in some of the sales, with seeing baby boomers being the largest acquirers of objects in world history, and now all of them trying to come up with a de-accession plan because their kids may not want it, it's more important than ever to have a team, not an individual, a team of knowledgeable thought leaders there to gather you through and take you through the sales process. what the real advantage of working with a global team is real access to the global venues, also to real access to specialty thought leadership, right? No individual will understand a complex sale. It requires a lot of intelligence, and 100 things can go wrong. And if one of those 100 things go wrong, the sale can be really ineffective. So my advice to anyone who's considering selling anything of significance is to have independent assistance through this process.
And I would say that there is no silly question when it comes to handling your personal objects. Getting the advice that you need is a pleasure for us. We truly enjoy what we do so, so much. And I enjoy looking at people's collections, and I enjoy walking through the memories with you and working through the timing and all of the complexities about going to sale. Please, by all means, don't hesitate to ask us the questions that you might have. We are truly here to help.
And on that note, we want to thank everyone for joining us today. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to any of us at the Fine Art Group.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Is it